Well, hello, friends. It is the middle of another week, and you are having a slightly belated between two Sundays. Mark is with me from Canberra, and I am with him from the Gold Coast. And there's a lot of space in between, which means we've got a lot of space we can fill with chats about what we talked about last week and what we're going to be talking about this week. How's that for an intro?
That's a great intro, Mark. Well done. I would like to note that we are still between two Sundays.
Yes, we
are.
It
may be a little late, but we're still
exactly
in between.
Right. I thought about that. Maybe we'll drop one on a Tuesday just to...
Yeah, that's right. We'll make up for it.
Just to mess with people's heads. All right. So, as always, the tradition of Between Two Sundays is that before we talk about the Sunday to come, we talk about how we've lived out of the Sunday just gone. And of course, last week we used the readings from the Liturgy of the Passion, which were from Isaiah 50, Psalm 31, Philippians 2, and Luke 22, the mammoth reading.
Yeah.
Which you'll be interested to know, in church on Sunday, that was a sermon, the whole passage.
Fantastic.
We read it in our priests organized different voices to read the different parts. And then after we finished, we sat in silence for 5 minutes and just contemplated, and then we continued with the service. It was brilliant. And I don't think he listened to the podcast beforehand, so that could be the deal there. But yeah, if I can sneak in on what I carried with me, that Philippians 2 reading, which is that beautiful hymn. I mean, I know we're talking just before the show about Paul and what I think of Paul and what you think of Paul. This has got to be a piece of Paul that it's really awesome. But it's interesting, a lot of people believe it was a hymn or a liturgy that was used in the early church. But that passage in Philippians 2, and the reason why it hung is this book I've been reading particularly, and some other things I've been contemplating and reading on, but that whole idea of the humility of Christ in the incarnation. It's not just about the humility of Christ in the incarnation in being able to do and accomplish the thing that Jesus believed he had to do, but the whole mission, the whole, to want a better term, but the whole ministry, if you like, the whole life of Jesus. And I include the years that we're fuzzy on. I include the years that we don't know about. That here is the Logos becoming flesh. And I love the way Eugene Peterson shares it, as it moves into the neighborhood. Literally comes and dwells among us. And the humility in that. I know we've all asked questions about whether did Jesus know who he was and what he carried. Some parts of the infancy narratives, of course, infancy right up to the age of 12, particularly the end there when Jesus is found teaching in the temple, suggests that perhaps he did. I love the speculation that maybe, even though in that moment there was a sense of, yes, I know what my mission is, that there would have been doubts. There would have been questions. There would have been grappling. When Jesus, when the Word became flesh and moved into the neighborhood, it didn't spend the whole of their time here, 2 inches above the ground, floating through things and appearing out of nowhere. Moved flesh and blood, sweat, tears, spit, everything else. Pooped and weed. All the other stuff that goes along with that earthiness, had to eat, got hungry, had to drink, got thirsty. So there would have been questions over, and this is why I love, and I've mentioned this a number of times, but Lamb, Christopher Moore's book, The Gospel According to Biff, Jesus' Childhood Pal. That's why I love this book, because Moore treats Jesus in the pure reverence, but a child Jesus asking, Biff, I think I'm meant to be, is Jesus speaking, I'm meant to have this mission. I believe God's called me to this mission, but how do I do it? What am I meant to do? How do I, so you got this real humanity to it. And the humility thing there is really knocked that in for me. And it's been sitting so there in the forefront of my mind over the past little bit, since Sunday. Just that whole humility. And then, of course, the long reading in church on Sunday, just following that story through and keeping that, humility thing in mind. Yeah, anyway, I mean, there's no rhyme or reason or conclusions to those things, but that's certainly been what's hung about in my thinking.
Yeah, it is a it is a direction that is that holds onto mystery, doesn't it? The God of the universe, humble, the God of the universe, encapsulated in matter. It is such it's such an extraordinary affirmation of the earth, of dirt. It's such an extraordinary affirmation that the holy God can come down and be matter. It's mind-blowing, and the kind of thing that really throws us, the religious world of separatism off balance, this separating of heaven and earth, this but the incarnation and the extreme end of the incarnation, the death of Jesus, really, this is so grounded. This is such an extraordinary affirmation of the goodness of creation, that a holy God can be it.
Yeah.
It's just wonderful. It's wonderful. It's so mind-blowing, and really does open us up to what has been called, especially in the Celtic Christian world, the Bible as the little book, and creation
is the big book,
as the big book. So this, we're not supposed to stop at just understanding the Bible, but this Bible, this book that shows us a picture of God that actually sends us out into this mysterious world, to be the mysterious universe, actually, to be forever mesmerized by the creativity and goodness and activity of God in the universe. I think this is, I think I've probably said this before, I think this is the task of eternity, is for us to explore the unending unfolding of the mystery of God in the universe.
Yeah.
That's just, and for me, that's just, that is anything but a boring picture of heaven.
Yeah.
That's an eternity of curiosity, an unending curiosity, which I think is just okay. Fantastic.
We'll be fine. There are others who'll be bored with it in 5 minutes, maybe, but we'll be fine. You and I would be mesmerized by that. Can I just point out a little bit about last week myself? Yeah, go.
Because I kind of got stuck on this Isaiah 50 passage. The Lord God has opened up my ear, and I was not rebellious. I did not turn backward. I remember talking to someone who said, the Hebrew here is God has dug ears into my head, effectively. It's a very, very graphic kind of, your ears are so stopped up that you can't hear, and I'm going to dig into your brain effectively and make sure you can hear.
I love that.
It's a very very provocative kind of image, isn't it? About our complete inability to hear without the miracle of God working. And I've been thinking about that and wondering, well, it's made me more grateful for the moments where I feel God has not only spoken, but also given me the capacity to hear. This is a miracle. You can understand, when you hold this idea, why Jesus seems to do so many miracles of making the blind see and the deaf hear. These are, and you have these summary statements where Jesus heals all the diseases and casts out all the demons. And yet there are so many specific stories in the Gospels around moving from blindness to seeing and deafness to hearing. It seems that selection of these stories, there's a bias towards moving from not being able to hear to hearing, not being able to see to seeing. And I think this is repeated so often that it really should prick our ears and make us think, actually, there's something more going on in this selection than just there were a lot of blind and deaf people and Jesus healed them. Actually, this is what the kingdom of God is doing. It's digging ears into our, and you think about it, if you don't have ears and they have to be dug into your head, you probably have no idea that you're deaf. This is just not part of the experience.
Yes.
And yet here is this insistence on that God is this determined to help us hear. And I love the fact that there's an openness to this process. It could even be a painful kind of metaphor, a painful kind of process. But all of that is just to say, I think this has the potential to make us staggeringly grateful rather than arrogant around the things we discover of God. It has all the potential for us not to think, for us not to rest those discoveries on my cleverness or my openness or my goodness or works or whatever, but actually to nurture a humility in us, even when we discover something new.
Yeah.
Because it's all grace. It's all grace. It's all gift. Always. We should be the most staggeringly humble people as a result of this story that we're claiming to learn to live by. How sad when it makes us full of ourselves and arrogant. It just should do the complete opposite to us. And that is, I think, a source of tremendous joy for us. I think if we're created in the image of this humble God, this is a space when we are just working out of gratitude like this. This is a space where we are entirely ourselves, where we're being faithful to the one in whose image we're created. But I'm always ending up there with almost every passage, so maybe that's not a surprise to anyone.
Let's keep in mind, if we honestly believe the words of Jesus, which were, the kingdom of God is within you, it's among you, it's around you, it's here, it's now, then the posture needs to be having our eyes opened and having our ears opened. We don't see it, but it's here, and we don't hear it, but it's here. So we need to have that happen. This stuff I've been reading, there's great illustration. There's there's two ways to get to the house next door. One is to go, like the next door is that way. One is to go that direction and go around the entire world and arrive next door. The other one is just to go next door.
Yeah.
There are two ways to discover space. One is to get in a rocket and fly up there as high as we can and go through all the effort. And the other one is to simply go, well, I'm on a planet that's hanging in space. I'm already here. And it's having our eyes and ears open to the fact that for all the weird and wonderful methods that we might try and come up with to get to the next door neighbors or get into space, the fact is it's right there and I'm already there. And this is the kingdom. It's all, all the effort, but as human beings, we like, as we were saying before the show when we were chatting, we like to be able to say, oh, I did it my way.
We seem to make it very hard, don't we? Yeah. Very complicated. Which I think is always evidence that we've got something wrong. I think the more complicated it is, the more likely I'm not to be following the way of Jesus.
Yeah. Right. On to Easter Sunday. We've made our way through Lent. We're in the midst of Holy Week. And we are just about to hit Easter Sunday in a couple of days. In fact, as we record this, tomorrow will be Maundy Thursday, then we'll have Good Friday, Holy Saturday, my favorite day of the Easter week, and then Easter Sunday. And the readings that we're looking at for Easter Sunday, we're using some of the alternative readings today. So we're looking at Isaiah 65, verses 17 to 25. We're looking at Psalm 118, verses 1 to 2, and then 14 to 24. We're looking at Acts chapter 10, verses 34 to 43. And we're looking at John chapter 20, verses 1 to 18. Really, the only verse that we've left off, the passage we've left off, is the 1 Corinthians 15, verse 19 to 26 passage. And we will be touching on that. I know Mark's keen to draw that in. And of course, all of these references to the passages we're using will be in the show notes. If you're watching on YouTube, they'll be down there. If you're listening, they'll be in the show notes of the podcast, or they'll be up on Instagram. So they're the passages. It's Resurrection Sunday. Where do you want to kick off, my friend?
Oh, well, the temptation is really to, the obvious place for us to kick off is with the gospel reading. This is what kicks off a lot of these images, I think, that we encounter in the other readings. So, and I know I'm sure you're keen to start with John. I know how much you love the Gospel of John.
Love John. But what's interesting, I don't know, you might want to come back and touch on some of the images that you were talking about. But the thing that I love about this particular reading from John's Gospel is where Mary encounters Jesus in the garden. I've been writing about this, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do with what I'm writing. I don't know, maybe I'll throw it over to you and I can do a guest post on Barefoot Follower or something. But there's
please.
It's this, and then there's three others straight after, which I'll refer to, even though they're not in the readings, but I'll refer to them in a moment. But this encounters and three others that follow are really, really interesting, because in every encounter we have, Jesus isn't recognized.
Yes.
So you have this Mary in the garden, and she thinks it's a gardener. Then after that, you have Jesus walking for a full day with two guys on a road, and it's not until at night when he breaks bread they suddenly realize who it is.
Yeah.
And then you have Jesus appearing to Thomas, who doesn't recognize him until he sticks his finger in the wounds And then after that, you have Peter, who doesn't recognize Jesus until he catches all these fish, and in my midrash of that has a flashback to when Jesus told him to put the nets out on the other side back when they first met, which is exactly what happens in this story as well. Jesus says, put the nets on the other side, and they pull in a whole bunch of fish. But in all these encounters, the thing that draws them together is that Jesus isn't recognized. And I wonder, and I'm not sure how much of a triumphant sermon this would make for Easter Sunday, but the question would be, have you missed the resurrected Jesus when you've encountered the resurrected Jesus every day? Have you recognized, have you missed this?
Love it. Love it.
And so I spent a whole bunch of time, sitting in that story and thinking, how did she not see? And it's interesting that in each case there's something different that awakens them. And in this case, this gets me. In this case, Jesus says her name.
Oh, yes. Yes.
He says, Mary, that's it. And straight away, she turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, Rabboni. Mary. All it takes is her name. Why are you crying? Oh, she says to the gardener, oh, have you carried him away? Where is he? Mary, what? And immediately she sees. Talking about, before, she hears the name and she sees. So there's this incredibly powerful, I guess, message in this that I see of this resurrected Jesus who's not recognized and not seems to be not acknowledged until something happens to change it. Name is said, bread is broken, wounds are touched, do this action. And in each of those, and this one in particular, that powerful idea that until he said her name, she would have completely missed that it was Jesus. And then that very last bit in verse 18, where she goes to the disciple and said, I have seen the Lord. What a really powerful thing. And she told them that he had said these things to her. And I wonder what has, and sits so well with what you were saying before from last week's, that you drew from last week, but what is it that the resurrected Christ has been trying to say to me or show me, but I haven't heard and I haven't seen because I haven't recognized? And do I need to look out for that just a little bit more? I also
love what you're saying. Love what you're saying. There's a little bit of me that wants to play with the so it's not just that they don't see, it's that they do. And that's the incredible thing here, isn't it? It's not just that they don't recognize, but they eventually do recognize. And you beautifully there, I think, have linked that recognition back to things that are familiar and earthy that they already know about Jesus. So the broken bread, this is something they've already experienced. The telling of the recognition of Mary's name, the using of Mary's name, this is something that Jesus has already done. So it's something familiar. The casting of the net on the other side. This is something, as you've pointed out, that has already happened, and it triggers the link between the Jesus who's incarnated in the flesh and this resurrected Jesus. So remember, as we've said before, not resuscitated Jesus, but this resurrected Jesus.
Yes.
And this is, and I think this is where the lack of recognition is a very powerful metaphor here. It's saying there's something different, there's something unrecognizable about him.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there's something so familiar. So this is where that language is so powerful, I think, not resuscitated, but resurrected.
Yeah.
This points to, as our Isaiah points us to, something new, new heavens and new earth. This resurrection that is a first fruit, as Paul wants to use that metaphor in 1 Corinthians. It's the first showing of what is going to happen on a bigger scale. It's that first fruit that is going to be an abundant harvest over and over and over again. And so it can expand into this understanding of new heavens or new earth, or I would dare say resurrected heavens or resurrected earth. This God is doing something brand new, and it's just this wonderful, wonderful start. Remember, we've been asked to follow Jesus. Right throughout the Gospels, and it's not just, and I'm sure it includes this. It's not just adopt the ethics of Jesus, adopt the values of Jesus. It's also this path that Easter is, life through death to resurrection. This is what following Jesus really is, I think. And I'm not trying to over spiritualize it. Because all of this, of course, runs through the earthiness that we've talked about of the incarnation of Christ. There's something just fantastic about it.
Well,
can I
go?
I'm just wondering if I can just point out a couple of things around the Isaiah 65 passage that really, really stuck with me here. I am about to create new heavens and new earth. That's an incredible metaphor, really. The idea that Isaiah is holding these two together, again, it's really an echo of incarnational language, I think, or a precursor to it. This holding together of heaven and earth. But there is evidence of this extraordinary continuity between what we know of heaven and earth here, of earth at least, and these echoes of something brand new happening here. So I was just noticing that there's there's no more weeping. So here is something kind of new happening. In this new heavens and new earth, and yet there's a continuity because we know what weeping is like. We know that that's part of the experience of life. And then there's the building of houses, the inhabiting of houses, the planting of vineyards, the eating of their fruit. This idea that our work will be fruitful and prosperous. There's still work to be done here, but it is beautifully fruitful. And then there's this other, the wolf will lie down with the lamb and feed together. The lion will eat straw like the ox, especially that lion one. That's that is a renewal of creation, because lions can't survive without eating ox. This is kind of in their nature as we see it in our world. This would be a physical change of their very being. Yet it's still recognizable here. There is this incredible sense of the new and the old together in this passage. It's in the context of Easter, it's really resurrection language.
And I think this is something you keep coming back to, albeit maybe implicitly as well as explicitly, but implicitly in
Yeah.
some of this stuff, is that it's not it's resurrection.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's not I've gone blank.
Resuscitation.
It's not resuscitation. Yeah, it's resurrection.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's something new.
It's something new. And this is really important. I know that, look, there's probably some listeners or viewers that might get a little bit defensive perhaps, or disagree with what I'm about to say. And I'm not taking away from the whole idea of what resurrection is, but when we understand that the resurrected Jesus walked through walls, the resurrected Jesus still had, nail prints and hole in the side, but wasn't recognized. The resurrected Jesus obviously is something different. And I think what you're saying here, this is so important. What's really interesting, and while you're talking, the physics popped into my head. There are as many atoms in the universe now, and particles and whatever it is in the universe now, as there were at the time of creation. So the bang happened. There is as many now as there was then. All that happens is that the atoms move on to become something else. So there's this transformation. It's really, it's happening right now, in the sense that, and it's happening as we're speaking still. I mean, our bodies shed and grow new skin, and every 9 years, I think it is, we actually are a completely different person. But somehow the atoms know to wire themselves in such a way that you are you and not me. And interestingly enough, there's atoms that move between things all the time. And right now there's atoms moving between this desk and the computer and the curtains and the dog hair and me. And so they're moving, and somehow they know to code themselves. We don't know how, right? It's mind-blowing stuff. But this idea that, and I think for many years, Christianity's, I don't know why I've held on to it, but it's a resuscitated Jesus. No, it's a resurrected Jesus. And it's so important we get that, because it means when we're resurrected, will we be recognized? I am, and I guess the really interesting thing is, I am not my body. If you were to cut off my little finger, I would not cease to be any less than the person that I am, because that bit of me is gone. So I'm not my body. So what am I, and how does that? See, we're talking about the resurrection. What does that look like? What does it look like when the essence of who Mark is resurrected, if it doesn't have to be this physical body? There is so much. I mean, you start contemplating on that, just forget ever coming out of it, because you'd be there forever. But even things like the lion laying down with the ox and the lamb, we're talking about a meat eater who has somehow had its whole nature transformed, that it doesn't have to eat meat anymore. We should just gloss over this, because it's important to understand that the very, when you said that, I went, whoa, the very nature of what it means to be a lion has been changed.
And what if, and I think this is worth exploring, what if the same has happened to the lamb? Because, part of the essence of a lamb is fear of the meat eater.
Oh.
So what if it's not just a change in a one-sided way, but it's actually,
well, it would have to be.
It's actually it would have to be, wouldn't it? The instinct of the lamb is to run. The instinct of the ox is to run. This is kind of their gift in the world. This is the way they survive, by the living on the stress of fear. That's their superpower, if you like. Maybe that's not quite the right way to put it, but that's the power they bring to the world and why they can survive. And here that's changed in response to this new heavens and new earth.
What if, how when we've read this in the past, I've always read it as a thing about the nature of the lion will change. But what if it's got not much to do with the lion and more to do with the lamb? Like when you talked about, this resurrected world, lambs won't have any, there won't be fear.
Yeah. What a remarkable
The
thought.
fear is gone.
And that maybe the lamb has grown into this and the lion has grown into this.
Yes. Yes.
I love the idea that this is not instant, but that it's a new direction that we grow into forever. The abandonment of our fear, the abandonment of our violence, and this for all creation, not just for the people, but for all of it, but for everything. For everything.
And this fits incredibly well with that whole resurrection story from John. Even that the idea that Mary, Peter, Thomas, the disciples on the road have to grow into this new understanding of who and what Christ has become.
Yes. Yes.
And
it points to an eternity of growth for us.
Yeah.
If God's love is unlimited, then we can explore and discover God for eternity and never get to the end.
Yeah.
So you think about that. One of those moments where you discover that God loves you a little bit more, and it hits you. It kind of knocks you off balance, and you're filled with wonder that God's love can be that much bigger than you've ever imagined before. Here is the idea of an eternity of that. So it's anything but boring. It's anything but this, sitting around in heaven playing harps. As a musician, that sounds like a bit of fun to me. But this is an eternity of discovery that you are loved more deeply than you imagined the moment before.
Yeah.
And that could be a pretty good way of spending eternity, actually.
Yeah.
But it links with this. It links with this idea, doesn't it, that John is kind of articulating here. His repetition of these 4 discovery journeys alongside the resurrected Christ. It kind of links in there with the idea that this isn't instantaneous. It's not suddenly everything is changed, but rather it's a growth into this. It's a discovery, which has, I think, all the echoes of God's original plan in Genesis, where we've got the entire garden to explore. With the exception of, well, I guess they were free to explore even the tree of temptation. There is this inherent part of the way God has made us that we are to discover and grow. And only if God's love is infinite are we able to discover that right throughout eternity.
Yeah.
And this, to me, is so much more exciting, and it's so much more of an exciting understanding of heaven than, how big will my mansion be, or will I have just, golden streets, or will I get a golden driveway into my mansion as well?
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. I appreciate that imagery sits in, in our Bibles in Revelation. But, Revelation is a pretty cryptic kind of book, lots and lots of imagery there. I don't think taking that literally is nearly as exciting as the thought that I will discover throughout eternity that I am loved more than I thought the moment before.
Yeah.
And it's never ending. It's infinite.
And lest we think that it's just for a certain few, the Acts reading, Peter
Yes.
chimes in and says, I
Yes.
now realize how true it is that God does not show favoritism, but accepts people from every nation who fear him and do what is right. By the way, that word right there, the righteousness, that's about justice.
Yes.
So people who exercise justice. You know the message God sent to the people of Israel, telling the good news of peace through Jesus, who is Lord of all. You know what has happened throughout Judea, preaching, beginning in Galilee after the baptism that John preached, and how God anointed Jesus of Nazareth with the Holy Spirit and power. Now he went around doing good and healing all who were under the power of the devil, because God was with him. And we are witnesses of everything he did. And they killed him by hanging him to a tree, but God raised him from the dead on the third day and caused him to be seen. There it is again, caused him to be seen. There's this
yes
process. Yeah, that's good. So he was not seen by all the people. He was not seen by the way, we never plan our stuff, folks. We wing it. We do our study on our own, and then we come together and do this. So we didn't plan to have this conversation, then read this and go, hello. This is a hello moment for us, because all this stuff we've been talking about, it's right here as well. And
yes, it is.
Anyway,
isn't it?
So he is not seen by all the people, but by witnesses whom God had already chosen, for us who ate and drank with him after he rose from the dead. So there's this encounter, that this transformation, this change. But as Peter makes it quite explicit right from the very beginning, it is for all people. There's no favoritism here. This event is cosmic. And I have a quote here that I found today on Twitter, and it's a quote from someone called Herbert McCabe, a book that they wrote in 1968, and someone has taken a screenshot and put it here, and I haven't had a chance to look up the reference and what the book was called or whatever, but this is really, really interesting. The person who dropped this screenshot in the tweet called it, "The resurrection is not a religious event." This is really cool. So Herbert McCabe writes, and I quote, "This is rather an important point. There are Christians who hold that the resurrection of Christ means that, although he died, he still lives on in the faith of his followers, a faith expressed by word and sacrament in the church. The basic Catholic objection, small c, Catholic objection to this is that it makes of the resurrection a religious event, one that makes a difference primarily to what happens in the church. Whereas for the Catholic, small c, tradition, the resurrection is a cosmic event. It means that Christ is present to the whole world, whether believers or not. The resurrection meant not just that a church was founded, it meant that the world was different. The church exists to articulate this difference, to show the world to itself."
Oh, Mark, you've got to send me that quote.
How is that?
I need that for preaching on Sunday morning, Easter Sunday morning.
But what's really, really interesting about that is it follows with this quote from this other book I've been reading, which is by Alan Watts. And for those of you who are listening who know Alan Watts are going, Alan Watts? This was his Masters of Divinity thesis from 1945 when he was an Episcopal priest, an Anglican priest. And he's talking about incarnation in this particular part of the book. It's called Behold the Spirit. He's talking about the spiritual life and kind of Christianity growing more into this whole mysticism, which of course is not new, but needs to be rediscovered in order to really fulfill what it is God's called us to be and do. But this whole idea that, I'm just trying to find the spot here, that this is understanding that the incarnation event, which of course includes the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, is not an event that was for just a certain group of people. It was an event that was for everyone. And that we really I mean, we have the choice to reject it. There is some truth to that. But at the end of the day, oh, here it is. This union with God is an entirely free, spontaneous, and unnecessary gift of the living and loving God, since the heart of being is not law and mechanism, but life. Hell consists of not being deprived of union, but in willful failure to appreciate it. In a state of soul so perverse that the love and the gift of union are so repulsive that they appear not as the light of glory, but as a terrible and consuming fire. So basically what he's saying is that, here's our motive for saying it, however perverted, makes not the least difference, because the fact is the fact. We have been given union with God, whether we like it or not, want it or not, know it or not. Our flesh has become his flesh. We cannot jump out of our own skins. And once we realize the futility of our pride, that we can neither ascend to God nor by reason of pride prevent his descent to us, the proud core of egoism is simply dissolved and overwhelmed by God's love. The function of Christian morality and spirituality is not to earn this or deserve this gift of eternal life, but rather to appreciate and express it. So there's this sense that this is a cosmic event that just changes everything for everyone, and you can't avoid it. It just is.
And if that's the case, Mark, what a tragedy that we have reduced this to something this is my religion against yours. We're actually saying this is for everyone. And there's just nothing here in this Acts reading that is describing religion.
No.
It's describing what God has done for the world. It's so much bigger. We take on I think we do a terrible injustice to the gospel when we reduce it to religion, because these people aren't. They just aren't doing that. In fact, they know. This is one of those stories that is full of evidence that the Holy Spirit has gone out into the world and the disciples are just following behind. They're catching up, and that is mission. Mission is catching up with what the Holy Spirit is doing. So I fall into conversation with someone, and there should be nothing in me that's thinking the Holy Spirit has come into this person's life because I've turned up. What I should be thinking is, what is God doing here? Can I have open eyes and maybe even the capacity to articulate for someone else what God is already doing?
And this is the important thing. This is why these things came to my mind as you were talking, because I might be conscious of it. I might see it. I might hear it. But that person over there, they might not. But it doesn't mean it's any less real. And it doesn't mean it has any less effect. It just means that right now they can't see it, they can't hear it, they can't understand it. But it doesn't mean that what Jesus has done wasn't for them.
I got to tell you a story. Mark. So I'm speaking with my wonderful friend Paul Wallace the other day.
How is he, man? How's Paul?
He's doing really well.
Please tell him, hey, I haven't talked to him in ages, but anyway.
I will. Right. Paul's doing at least, he's doing a lot of things, but one of the things he's doing at the moment is coaching. So he's doing sort of pastoral work one-on-one is the way he's describing it. And but he was telling me that he's been really surprised how many people who he is working with who are, very successful in their careers, really high level professionals, and wouldn't describe themselves as followers of Jesus. And Paul is coaching these people. And Paul said to me, you wouldn't believe how many of them are coming to me and saying, I want to discuss my experience of being nudged in a direction. So some of these people are saying, I walked into a cafe and everything in me knew that I had to go and talk to this person I'd never met in the cafe. And so they go and do it. And there are significant links that lead to something that either helps them in their life or helps them in their career or something like that. They are coming to Paul and saying, I need someone to help me understand what this nudge is. Now, Paul, is finding his own theological ways to articulate this. But if that's not someone coming into a conversation with the expectation that God is at work everywhere, I don't know what is.
Yes.
It's this fantastic belief that the Spirit of God is working everywhere. And you know what? I find myself more and more going into conversations with people who don't even consider themselves to be not only not Christian, but in some cases not religious, or maybe even not spiritual. And yet I find myself saying, what is God doing here? And coming with this inquisitive spirit. Can I join in?
Yeah.
Kind of approach. And I dare say it looks to me more fruitful.
Well, what's really interesting as you're talking, and I'll use this facetious example because this is one I hate. You know, Christians who pray for car parks. Come on.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like the Christian who prays for the car parks and gets the car park. And then somebody else who's not a Christian or even religious driving through a car park going, come on, let there be a car park. Oh, yeah, there's a car park. Woo! But the Christian then saying, oh, that's not God.
Yes.
And look, I'm not saying it is, I'm not saying it isn't. What I'm saying is that for one person, they're going to match it with God's doing this because of who I am. The similar things happen to this person, but it can't be God because that's whatever. I look at that and I'm the stuff we're talking about right now, it's very much like that with God. I remember one of my early pastors, and I should have listened harder. This guy was one of my very first mentors in ministry. Was my first mentor in ministry. I preached my first sermon when I was something like 16 or 17 years old, and Delroy was there for that. And a wonderful man who, I know the Bible like I know the Bible now because of Delroy Brown. Even though on some theological issues we would probably differ a lot now, but brilliant stuff. But he always used to say to me, all truth is God's truth.
Yes.
And I probably took me far too long to get the net that there's a thing that should be keeping us humble in that if it's true, then can God reveal himself through that? The answer is yes. Should it be, could be controversial now, but should it be any surprise then that we find so many similarities to the teaching of Jesus in other religions? That we find, that deep down in the heart of all human beings, there's this capacity for love. Well, if we're each made in the image of God, of course it's going to be there. We can't walk around blind to that just because, as you were saying before, my God's bigger than your God, because there isn't multiple gods. There's one God. You might call it this, I might call it that, but is there something there? As we were talking just now, I'm looking at the Psalm, and it's a really interesting. It's really interesting because we're talking here about being grateful and thankful. The Psalm just nails it. Give thanks to the Lord, for the Lord is good. His love endures forever. Let Israel say, the love endures forever. And then it drops down to verse 14. The Lord is my strength, my song has become my salvation. Shouts of joy and victory resound in the tents of the righteous. The Lord's right hand has done mighty things. The Lord's right hand is lifted high. The Lord's right hand has done mighty things. I will not die but live and will proclaim what the Lord has done. There's this song of praise and celebration which sits in the readings for this Sunday. And if we're talking about resurrection in the way that we've been talking about, how apt and right is it that we celebrate and rejoice in this activity of God's Spirit that changes the very nature of the world, that affects everything on a cosmic level, that is for all people, and in which we grow into as part of our journey as our eyes are open and our ears are open to the revelation of this resurrected Christ, who we often don't recognize, but we need to be mindful and conscious of, so that we can see the evidence of God working in the world. There's a lot in these readings. I know we say that every week, but
there's a conversation throughout eternity in these readings, I think. I really do believe that. I really do believe they're that big. The incredible claim that you've just read, his steadfast love endures forever.
Forever.
That is the most extraordinary claim. Eternity to explore the goodness and wonder and love of God, and not exhausted. What an extraordinary claim. Mark, before we finish off here, we haven't said a lot about, so there's kind of an eternal debate around Easter about the bodily resurrection of Jesus. And this, we've looked, I wonder if we've looked at, at this resurrected Jesus and not always held, well, maybe as we've done this, we've held the groundedness, the bodiliness of this. Now I want to say, as when I say not resuscitated, resurrected, I also want to say not just body, but bodily and resurrection. And I think both of those languages are heading in the same direction. But there's just something in me that really wants to say this is historical. This is something that happened, an event in time, and I want to keep it there, and say that it blows those boxes, those small boxes, out of the water. That this is an event that grows from here, that grows out of the bodily and the grounded and the incarnational. I don't think there's something in me that really struggles to see this as good news if it's just spiritual and got nothing to do with earth and flesh and who we are right now.
Yeah, and look, I'd like to think
and something that takes it out of incarnation to me and removes it from being good news for us.
Yeah, and I just want to touch on that. I think I touched on that before when I mentioned how, atoms transform, they move, they change, and I don't cease to be, but I'm interested to know what package. Now, is it a bodily resurrection? I'd like to think it is. I'm interested to know what new package the atoms take up, though, because I think there's something very powerful that we need to keep in mind, that the resurrected Jesus wasn't readily recognized. Why?
Yes.
Because must have looked
and
different.
yet was recognized.
And yet was recognized. And
this is where I want to hold those two together.
Eventually.
Not recognized and recognized.
So I really would have loved some of these disciples to have said, this is what Jesus looked like now.
Yeah.
And even, even if they'd speculated about why that Jesus might have taken on that form, but I would like to think that there is some way in which those atoms that make up this now, somehow, what does it look like once and this is interesting, there's this argument that I've heard, and I know there's probably some people listening who hold to this, and you're quite welcome to. I'm not debating what that is. Who would say, we mustn't when someone dies, we mustn't cremate them because they have to have a bodily resurrection.
Yeah.
And I think, well, with all love, if you're buried long enough, you're turning to dust as anyway. It's just going to be a little bit slower. So there's this interesting question.
That's really interesting because burial in the Christian tradition is actually an expression of expectation that the body will be resurrected. So there's something good still here. I think it's a symbolic kind of act, a symbolic practice of belief. So if a body is cremated, I think what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say it's historically a symbol of resurrection that we bury rather than cremate. But I don't think that affects anything about reality at all.
No, and that's what I mean.
It's very, very problematic to suggest that if the body's not to be found in the ground at the return of Jesus, then Jesus has got nothing to resurrect.
That's exactly right.
That is extremely problematic for someone who's incinerated in a car accident. That is an extremely problematic sort of approach to life, really, approach to resurrection, if you take it literally. But I do like the symbolism of it. There's something in me that likes the symbolism of burial as a way of expressing expectation that this body will be resurrected.
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's. I don't believe it's necessary, but no. I do like the symbolism.
It's a symbolism, and but I guess that's my point, is that the way the atoms are reformulated.
Yes.
Who knows? So
really good.
Yeah. Which at the end of the day, I mean, to be perfectly honest, is if I'm me, does it really matter what form I take? Anyway,
I'm wondering, Mark, if it's entirely appropriate that we have broken a record for the length of our Between Two Sundays as we discuss Easter, the pinnacle of the Christian calendar.
Maybe. Love to see how we go at Pentecost.
Absolutely.
I must say that, and look, shout out to all the Orthodox friends out there. Our podcast is certainly shorter than the average Orthodox Easter service, which I love. The whole kit and caboodle, the whole 3 and a bit hours of it, from midnight to, from 11 o'clock, whatever it is, to 2 a.m. or whatever. I've done it once. I'd love to do it again soon. It's amazing, the symbolism in there. Oh man, I could go on all night. But it's interesting that
such a rich,
and I think we've cracked the hour for the first time. But anyhow,
at least
that is Between Two Sundays for Easter. And look, I pray that over the next couple of days, your contemplation, your prayer, your reflection is something that takes you deeper. And maybe some of the things we've discussed here are worth contemplating, worth dwelling on. Where is the resurrected Christ in your day and your life? How is that transformation happening for you as you grow into that resurrection life? The first fruits and the Psalm, contemplating the Psalm 65, that transformation of the whole nature of that lion and lamb. That's a really interesting one. It's probably going to stick.
Yeah.
But over the next few days, as you do that and take the time to do that, I mean, there's a reason why this is central to the Christian Church. This festival, this celebration. But let's not jump. And I know we've often talked about this. Let's not jump to Sunday just because we know the end of the story. Let's sit with Thursday. Let's sit with Friday. Let's sit with Saturday, and allow God's Spirit to really speak to us and transform us as we contemplate fully what's going on, both then and now, both in the disciples and in ourselves, with this whole story of Easter. And may God bless you in whatever you're doing. And for you, my friend, who will be leading services over the Easter weekend, may you find the strength.
Yeah.
I'll be at most of the services at our church, almost all of them actually. I'm only participating in a couple, two or three of them, but nice. All the best, mate.
Nice. Yeah, thank you. I'm actually looking forward to it. I've organised a few things for Good Friday and for Easter Sunday, and now that they're done, I'm looking forward to it. So
awesome.
And our discussion tonight, just so good to delve deep into the implications of the resurrection. Wonderful.
I'm going to be honest, I haven't really listened through a whole of our podcasts yet, but I think I'm listening this one back, probably on Friday. Friday I said that. I think I'm going to listen to this one back. This has been fun as always, and don't forget we'll be back next week for another Between Two Sundays, but I don't want to talk too much about that because I really want to sit with this whole Easter time. So God bless you, be with you, and you too, my friend.
And you.
All right, folks, until next week, stay safe, and may grace, peace, and love go with you every step of the next few days. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.
See you later. Thanks for joining us.